Here they are, exactly 7 days after sowing these tomato seeds. They look fantastic. I have nearly 100% germination, if not 100%. In 7 more days, these will be ready to be potted up into a larger container. 2 weeks after that, they'll be ready to go in the garden. So we're off to a great start this year. I was looking at the footage today I made when I sowed these seeds. There really wasn't enough detail for beginners in that footage. I had to sow more seeds today, so while I was doing that, I got some great close-up video footage for beginners for exactly step-by-step how I do this. And in fact, I give 2 options for how to sow these seeds. If you're a gardener that doesn't have a lot of space where they start their seeds, but they want to start a lot of seeds to go out in the garden, that second option is for you. Enjoy the video. Hi everyone. If you're a subscriber, welcome back. If you're new to my channel, my name is Riley. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for clicking on that video. We're in week 2 of my spring 2023 garden, and this week I am planting my peppers, my eggplant, my tomatoes. I'm going to have those ready to go out. The tomatoes in 4 weeks and the eggplants and peppers in 6 to 7 weeks. Normally every year right after Christmas I get super excited about the garden and I end up planting these way too early. I end up having all kinds of plants all around the house because I can't get them under the lights. They don't fit anymore. I've got to move them outside during the day, then bring them in at night if there's chances of a frost. And I really create a lot more work for myself than I need. So if you watched last week's video, week 1 garden planning, and how I plan my garden and what I'm going to plant this year, I created that spreadsheet so that I feel confident that even though I'm starting these a lot later than I normally would, I'm going to be doing this to prevent a lot of needless work in the future. So sometimes we just get too excited and we plant our plants too early, but let's just get right into this. So what I'm using today, normal organic potting soil as normal, although I'm going to do something a little bit different this week than I normally do, and I'll show you that. I have a tray here to mix up my potting soil with water to get it damp before I put it into my 6-inch seed cells, and I use these flimsy plastic 6-inch seed cells and reuse them every year. I have a 10-inch by 20-inch tray that these seed cells nest right into. I have for labels, as always, I use blue painter's tape and a Sharpie marker, and I'll show you that in a moment. I also have a pencil. You could use a dowel rod. You could just make a little indentation with your finger if you like. I use this to make an indentation for the seed that I then fill in with a couple of drops more of soil. I like it because that pencil eraser is almost the perfect depth for me to plant these tomatoes and peppers and eggplant seeds. And then of course, I've got my seeds. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to label all of my trays. And I'll do an example of that now. Then I'll go off camera, I'll finish labeling them all, and then I'll come back and we'll start to plant these seeds. The reason I do this before is it's easier to label them all before your hands get all dirty with the wetted potting soil. Otherwise, you have to wash your hands off after you plant each type of seed you're starting, clean your hands off, then relabel another tray, and it's just easier to do it all at once. So this could not be easier. I'm just going to take a strip off. We'll start with my Orient Express eggplants, and I'm just going to write O-E eggplant. Take my seed starting cell, tape that right on there like that, and there it is. And that will stay on if it gets wet, even if it gets rained on. And the great thing about this is it peels off really, really easily. These little thin seed starting trays, cells, very easy to tear because they're so thin. This painter's tape and that Sharpie marker work perfectly. I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to label the rest of these and I'll be right back. Everything is labeled and we're going to be growing or sowing today Orient Express eggplant, some lunchbox peppers that are orange, some lunchbox peppers that are red. I love these. These are all from Johnny's Seeds. Some big beef tomatoes, indeterminate beefsteak tomato. This year I'm also, for the first time, growing San Marzano tomatoes for making tomato sauce. And I have two kinds. I have regular San Marzano that I bought at either Home Depot or Lowe's. And I'm going to measure this up against this Johnny's Seeds San Marzano 2 tomato, just to see if there's any difference. And then I'm also growing some sweet orange peppers I got at the big box store and some mixed bell peppers that I got at the big box store. And to be honest, I've never had great luck growing in the garden these big mixed bell peppers that we can buy at the grocery store. But I'm going to give it a try this year and we'll see how it goes. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sift some of the potting soil. Potting soil is great for starting seeds. You don't need to buy a separate seed starting mix just for starting your seeds. Potting soil works great. The only downside is in potting soil there can be some bigger chunks of bark material and it's not going to affect you poorly. You can just pull them out by hand. But this year what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sifter now and I'll sift some of this potting soil to get those bigger chunks out. Normally when I sift my compost, my sifter has a screen with 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch mesh on the bottom. This one I made with 1/4 inch mesh and I did some practice runs with it and it works great. Let me just show you this. I've already done a lot, so I'm just going to do one small batch just to show you how this works. Just take a scoop of the potting soil, drop it in my sifter, run it back and forth, and there you can see all these bigger chunks of bark. And these just get in the way when you're starting seeds. You've got to pull them out. It doesn't take that much more time, so if you don't have the sifter, you don't have to worry about it. But I just found this year I would give this a try. Now, incidentally, I once did that with that 1/4 inch hardware cloth to my regular compost that I make in my garden, and I tried to use that to start seeds with. And that did not work well because that compost didn't have any vermiculite or perlite in it. It compacted. It really didn't have good airflow. It had poor drainage just because there was nowhere for the water to go. It was just pure small compost that was compacted together. But this potting soil has perlite in it. So this is just fantastic. This is going to work perfectly, I'm sure. So I'm actually going to let Bella in the house because she's scratching the door. I'm going to take some of my sifted potting soil, drop it in my container. First one we're going to be planting today is Orient eggplant. Open that up. Add some water to this. If you've never started seeds before, I really encourage you to get the material damp before you put it into your seed cell starting trays. What ends up happening is potting soil, seed starting mix, there's a lot of peat moss in it. And peat moss holds, the water retention for peat moss is great, but that water has to get worked into that peat moss. It has to soak into that peat moss, and that takes a little bit of time. So what ends up happening is, if you put just dry potting soil or seed starting mix in your cell, and then you go to put water on it, it's going to pool everywhere up on top. The first few millimeters of that soil is going to be floating. Your seed potentially could float away if you're planting it shallow like we do for tomato and peppers and eggplants. It creates a big headache. So I have this well moistened. If I squeeze it, just a few drops come out. That's really good. I'm going to move some over. All right, let me bring you in close so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now I'm just filling up the container. Look at this. I take my fingers and I compress the soil down into each cell. One time, just like that. Then I refill the container and I just tap it in, just like that. And I take my pencil, or you can use a dowel, or you could use your finger, and I'm going to put a hole right in the center, right there in one of these cells. Take my seeds. I'll take one or two seeds, and I always overdo this and put in too many, and I just drop it in there. Then I take a little bit more soil, just fill it in, tap it in, and do that in each cell. Now, if you didn't have a lot of space to start your seeds, you can grow 2 seedlings in each of these little cells, and then when you're ready to transplant those, all you do is you pull those 2 apart and you transplant them into 2 separate containers. I've done that before with tomatoes a lot, and in fact I've done a video that clearly explains it, and I'll link the video, or I'll put a link in the video description below so you could have a look at that if you like. What that looks like is, I'm just going to come over here, put in 1 dot there, 1 dot there, each of the corners of that cell. Same process. I'll take 2 seeds. I'll put 1 seed in there, 1 seed in there, a little soil in, fill it in, fill it in. Job done. And I'll repeat that with all of my cells, put them under my lights, check them for water once a day. In 7 days, we should have some great starts ready. Pat it down. That is well moistened soil. This is ready to go under my lights, on top of my heat mat. Next week I'll be showing you that whole setup for how I start these seeds, transplant them, move them under my LEDs. This is ready to go. I do the exact same process for every single one of these seeds, and I get great germination rates. The only thing I changed this year was we sifted out those big chunks from the potting soil, so I didn't have to do it by hand. I'm 4 weeks away now, once I finish this tray, from getting some plants in the garden, the 2023 spring garden, and I'm really excited. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It helps the channel. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. We'd love to have you on the channel. See you next week.